Welcome to Groundwork, a podcast from McClanahan Corporation to talk about key material processing topics from agriculture to mining to material recycling. We'll discuss the best ways to process raw materials that power the world, because if it's not grown, it's mine. So my name is Renee Schrift, and I've been with the company for 25 years. I work with the agricultural sector of our business. We're coming up on 30 years of existence with McClanahan Corporation, and McClanahan Corporation is in business for 190 years. So pretty special, monumental anniversaries here coming up. We are here at World Dairy Expo, and we are bringing our podcast to you from our show this year. We have two booths at World Dairy Expo, one inside and one outside, all focusing on the products that we have to offer for sand recovery and for enhancing manure and sand bedding. We wanted to bring you this podcast just to give you a little bit more education on design, dairy design, and housing. That's something that we focus on a lot. And I also have with me today Jake Martin from JGM Dairy Design Engineers, and he's going to introduce himself here and just tell us a little bit about their business and what they do.
Okay, Renee, thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you guys today. My company, JGM Dairy Design Engineers, has been around. I guess it started back in 1991, something like that, so 34 years ago. And we specialize, as the name implies, in the design of dairy facilities throughout the world. Usually, on average, about half of what we do is in the U.S. and half is overseas. We have a tendency to stick toward the warmer climates. So in my case, I'm in Florida, so we work with Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, Tennessee, up into Virginia. And then overseas, we have a tendency to go into Southeast Asia, into the Middle East, into Australia and different places like that. So, but it's mostly, we concentrate on dairy housing, mostly into barn type applications and milk and parlors and manure management systems. So we do we specialize, but we're pretty broad geographically.
Right. I know when I first started with McClanahan Corporation 25 years ago, we were looking at working with some dairies in the South, and I got a chance to travel with Dr. Bill Bickard and Andrew Wado at the time, and that's how I met you. And we were looking at housing and sand bedding and comfort. And once I was on some of your dairies in Tennessee and Kentucky and that area of the United States, that had a great impression on me for sure, as just a young, coming into a young, just out of college student, coming into the industry to actually work in the industry, and definitely recognized your housing design right off the bat. So no matter where I go in the world, when I see something that you guys have done, you definitely know that your touches were on it, or your team, just because of the design and how much you guys detail out every aspect of that dairy and work with those dairy producers. And I can honestly say too, no matter who I talk to, if I ask them if Jake Martin helped them with the dairy design, they get a great smile on their face and they say, yeah, we enjoyed working with Jake. He knows his stuff, and he's so thorough in designing the dairies, and I've never heard anything otherwise. So anyway, great impression on the dairy industry and with the housing and the comfort. And I think that's why there's a little bit of synergy here. And I asked you to come onto this podcast today. We, as McClanahan, we focus a lot on bedding, of course, and sand bedding and recycling sand bedding. And then also even working into some of the more of the manure solids bedding dairies and trying to make that an enhancement for them, trying to make that bedding product a little bit better. So as far as the design concepts and just the whole logistics of flow of manure, having cows comfortable, the importance of the bedding going back to the facility, whether it's coming out of a McClanahan system or a sand lane or a modified sand lane McClanahan system, whatever it is, we always try to strive to make sure that we're helping to produce the best bedding. Our systems are producing the best bedding for the dairy. So I think it complements each other quite well. I think we're after a lot of the same goals. But it really just starts with you guys and your team and designing that dairy. So I kind of wanted to dive into a little bit about the advancements in the design and the housing that you've seen throughout your career. Just kind of touch on some of those broad topics as far as the overall design and housing and where you see it from your seat today.
Well,
Yeah.
you said some kind things about me, so thank you for that. Um, there's a most of what we do starts with the dairy producers. So we're a we're a team member as opposed to in charge of a design. So dairy producers approach us with a dream, a vision of what they want to do, and that's where we come in. We help them realize their dream, realize their desires to put a great facility together. But I'm always impressed and humbled by the people that we work with. They're just amazing individuals. So everything that we've been doing from the very beginning is about cow comfort. And so whether it be from barns and laying surfaces and walking surfaces, from fans and sprinkler systems, from everything that's out there, from the cow's experience in a milking parlor, it's all about cow comfort. And if we can take care of her, she's going to take care of the dairy producer. And so that's our role, our mission in doing these facilities. The right in the very beginning, back in the early '90s, down in Florida, when I moved down there, a lot of cows were still outside. They were in pastures. They were kind of grazing, but not really. They were and it was a mess. Summer times were bad. It was a difficult time, and so the producers have moved from that experience through the years into to full time housing these animals. And over time, we've tried to figure out just how to do this. And through research from the universities that's out there, from producers who are actively pursuing something different, they've achieved wonderful things that were out there. And we're only part of it as a designer. We only do a portion of it. You got animal breeding and nutrition, genetics, management, things like that. So we're just a piece of that puzzle. And so we're under no illusions or delusions that we're the key element. Because what we try to one of the things that we try to do from philosophically is say that I've seen some great facilities fail miserably, and I've seen some really crappy facilities succeed, and it's all about management. So is you take a really nice facility and you put a really wonderful management team together, and they can indeed succeed. But that's the part that we play.
Right. I think it's a I mean you're the brick and mortar for setting the foundations for those facilities. And I think logistically too, I've always been impressed with just the cow flow to the parlors and just and the movement of the cattle throughout the facilities. That seems to be pretty important, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. But that's been beat into us. That's been beat into us. Dairymen are pretty rough. If we do something and we screw something up, we find out about it pretty quick. But it's this people who understand cows, and so we understand what we understand. What I understand comes from, my mentors and the people that have trained me. You mentioned Bill Bickert a while ago. That Andrew was one of his mentees. I had Dennis Armstrong from University of Arizona was my mentor for many years, and so he taught me basically everything I know about dairy designs and cow flow and cow comfort. But we bring that to the table. But cow flow, it's a big deal, and it's hard to know. You got to think like a cow, which sometimes is a hard thing to do. But you got to understand how people work and what makes it easier for them. What makes it easier from people who work on these facilities. What can we do from a facility design that makes it that helps them do their job but easier.
Yeah. I just as a sideline question, then I know with my team, after our system's sold, like our engineers, when we're designing full laid out blown systems turnkey with all the moving parts and the process flow, it's always good to go back and assess what you've done or what you've put out there from an engineering point of view. You can't just always be designing behind the desk, I say. So, it's good to get out there and actually see it and live it for a couple of days. I mean, they're going to live it for the rest of the life of the dairy. But it's good for you to go out as an engineer to see and walk those facilities after they're designed. I'm sure you guys do that all the time, and you get to visit some of your clients that you've had a long standing relationship with. So what has worked and what hasn't. So
You got to get cow manure on your feet.
yeah, you got to get cow manure on the bottom of your pants a little bit. Get some
Mm-hmm.
backsplash. um,
Mm-hmm.
so as far as like what you talked about earlier, 50% of your engineering is domestic or in North America or here, and then the other part of it is international. I just kind of thought it would be very, very interesting for our listeners just to kind of dive into a little bit more of the trends, and if you really do see anything like different happening, like let's say in Australia or New Zealand or wherever you're designing today, based on really what we're doing also here in the United States, as if there's any differences or if there's just a lot of parallels.
The biggest difference comes into whether a country has a cow culture or not. So we've done a lot of work in Australia since the mid '90s, and there are some wonderful cow people there. People who live, eat, breathe, and sleep cows. The difference is that they're truly a grazing culture. And so I've been very impressed and proud of these guys that we've worked with who've taken the steps and the initiative, and they've really cut against the grain in order to do these housing systems that we're doing that people thought would fail, and they've succeeded quite well. But it's a different world, and they didn't have anybody there who could help them, and that's why they came to us, this far away, to be able to assist them in putting these facilities together. But each country is a little bit different like that. China was rough back in late '90s, early 2000s. They didn't have a cow culture, and so they didn't have anybody who knew cattle, and they knew how to work with cows, and didn't know anything about cow flow and how do you treat animals. And so, and the people that they hired, there was nobody there. There was nobody to service their milking parlors. So, it's a really difficult place. It's Indonesia, going into Vietnam, going to different places like that. They've really learned well, but it's a different place. And then when you start working there, you have to understand that. But the big issue that we run in, that we start with in everywhere that we go on a new location, is climate data. Dr. Joe Harner from Kansas State University has been a key person in our team, and he's the first person there. He's the first person that when we look at a new environment, he's the guy who goes and takes a look and sees what's out there from a climate standpoint, so then we understand how to design these facilities. Some people from other countries come into the U.S., they make the mistake of going to the wrong location, and then they take a design that's already here and then they transplant it to where they are. So if somebody from Vietnam comes here to Wisconsin and tries to put a Wisconsin design in there, it's not gonna do so well. And the same thing if somebody's in the northern climates of China and they come down to the south of Florida, they're not going to see what's correct there. So we always start with weather data, and that's how it goes. But the big issue that we run into in other countries is there's no infrastructure, dairy infrastructure there, people, equipment, service, and so it makes it difficult for folks as they put these facilities together, and they don't have no management experience, and so they have to bring people in from other parts of the world.
Yeah. So I definitely can see where you're also consulting on them, getting them aligned with certain people that you may have had seen success with on another dairy that you designed in Australia, and then just kind of keeps building upon that, but seeking those people out and figuring out who could actually do it, and then also educating them, especially if they've never built a dairy like that before. So what goes into it? So I mean, that's truly a lot of work on your end.
Yeah, exactly right. But we do the same thing that you guys do. Is that when somebody approaches you on a facility, um, you want them to go out and actually visit facilities. They need to go to other farms. They need to see what's going on, put their hands on it, get their feet dirty, and to see what other people have done.
Right. Exactly. Um, Diving into a little bit more on the stall side, we talked a little bit, and I mean, just well, I'll jump back a little bit on the climate. I even see here in the United States. I mean, cross ventilated freestall barns, power ventilated freestall barns. There was this time and era where everyone kind of thought, oh, maybe I just put in these cross ventilated freestall barns. But I do appreciate what you're saying for sure about Dr. Joe Harner and looking at the climate, because not even those barns, just here in the United States with the vast experience that we have and the culture of dairy that we have established here and the advancements and everything, especially genetics, like you can create a bad environment really quick. Especially even when we're talking about bedding and recycling bedding and bringing bedding back into the facility that might have some dampness to it and some moisture, and then you're putting it into this environment that just isn't really suited for the climate that you're sitting in. And so that also can be very detrimental. So I think climate is just a very key thing. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is so true. That's where you start. Like, what kind of facility am I going to design, and how are these cows going to be comfortable in this environment of where I'm planting this dairy, or I'm going to decide to build this dairy. So that's really key. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, and one of the things about the climate, some people look at temperature and then they look across the globe and they say, well, this is an average of 95 degrees or 35 C high temperature. So therefore, these are the same two farms. They're the same two locations. So down here in Florida, we're 95 degrees and 65 or 70% relative humidity, as opposed to 95 degrees and 10% relative humidity. Two different climates, two different farms. It's completely different designs. And so we run into that on a regular basis. And that's where we ran into problems with cross-ventilated barns and humid environments. It was just too humid. And the part of the deal with those barns succeed is when you can drop the temperature down to sucking air through the building. And if you get a high humidity, the temperature doesn't come down, and it creates some problems. So we run into situations where we look at climate first and then design around the climate, and don't go into what somebody wants as opposed to what the proper thing to do is for their climate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you're constantly chasing what are the problems in the barn, and we've walked facilities where the stalls are damp, but then they start packing because they're not aerated well. The climate in the barn is not allowing the bedding to dry out, and so then it just compounds, and then we have all these health issues in the facility. And so then what do you do? And so from a bedding standpoint, and what McClanahan has tried to work on is making dry, clean bedding all the time. So in some of these situations, it's helped McClanahan even morph what we offer today as far as the dewatering systems and the dryers to help compensate for some of those. And I'm not going to call them mistakes, but they're just probably just lack of experience with the climate, and then this also the design. And like you said, you have to do your due diligence. And if you're considering certain facilities because you like them or it's a trend, you got to really ask yourself if it's right for where you're going to build a dairy. So as far as like the stall design, let's kind of shift gears a little bit to inside the barn, on the stall design, pen designs, trends there. And that probably goes along with just even traffic. But are there any trends that you're seeing that are different than just the conventional sand stall design that we all know of, and the dimensions that are out there that are kind of a guide? But like, is there anything new that you're seeing with the comfort of the stall and the designs of the stall in the barns?
Back in the early '90s, we had stalls that were 48 inches, 1.2 meters on center. 35 years later, we have stalls that are basically 48 inches, 1.2 meters on center. We've tried all sorts of things, but at the end of the day, cows haven't gotten too much bigger. We had herds that are larger. We try to design stalls around the size of animals. So if cows are in that 1,350, 1,400 pounds, 650 kilos size range, they're going to fit pretty well in a decent size 48-inch stall or so. The tendency we've had lately is to go with a longer stall. So give cows a little bit more room. One of our key producers down in Florida, Don Bennick, He was a big proponent of trying to get cows breathing space. So in other words, it used to be 16 foot was head to head freestalls. Then we went to 17 feet. Don liked his stalls at 18. But just wanted a little bit more breathing room up in the front. Now, is that a necessity? You're going to produce more milk because your cows got 2 feet more in front of their noses. It's just it's a matter of preference in cow comfort. But for the most part, we tweak different things. They got all sorts of different freestall loop designs that are out there. Some of them are cuter than others. Yeah, it's hard to. I don't see any data that's out there too much that changes things around. One of our colleagues, Gordy Jones, has done a lot of work on freestalls, and we rely on him a lot for different things. He's got some things that are out there that are pretty interesting that we work with. The guys at Penn State, and Dan McFarland was there, who recently retired. Dan and his crew, John Tyson and others, did a really good job of putting good data out there about stall designs and loop designs, and based on cow size. And so it's really difficult when you get into a one size fits all type situation. So we really go back to what are the size of these animals, the average size of these animals in these stalls, and try to work around that as much as we can. But we're constantly learning. We make mistakes, but you try to correct them. We try to get to the point. A lot of the loops that we're doing now, the stall designs that we're doing now, are using the fully adjustable. So they're not only are they adjustable on making them wider and narrower, but you can make up and down. And so if you put a system in like that, it allows yourself to mess up a little bit. It allows it to change from a heifer barn to a cow barn to a dry cow barn. So it's these producers are sharp people, and the guys that we work around, they have the different ideas about how they want to do things, and we customize these facilities based on that.
So I guess that even on like milk markets today, and some dairies going from Holsteins to Jerseys, or just kind of are transitioning. If they're looking at, like you were saying, this adjustable stall, that's interesting because I mean it might not always stay like a Holstein facility. It may need to change based on their market or what they're getting for their product, and they want to target another processor. So maybe they'll switch over to Jerseys or cross. So then maybe there's some adjustment and flexibility there. But that's a nice thing, I guess, to have in the design. So it gives you that flexibility. So you have to go back in and spend a lot of money to make big adjustments.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So that's what a lot of guys do though.
Yeah. In your experience today, do you do more design for Holsteins or more design for cross? Because I mean, even internationally in Australia, I mean, there's a lot of great Holstein herds there, but I don't. What are you designing for right now? Probably the most.
Black and white, almost exclusively. Yeah, but very few. Yeah, well, I mean, so out in the we don't do any work in like in Kansas and places like that. Joe Harner does a lot of work out there, and so a lot of these guys are using the Holstein Jersey crosses, Hojos, and Jerseys, and so it's a little bit different environment than as opposed to what the Holsteins that we would normally work with. Overseas is the same thing, and if people who are in a fluid market that want to produce the most milk they possibly can per animal, they usually have a tendency to go with Holsteins, and so that's what we're designing around. Obviously, we're going to know that up front, which breed that they want, and then design the facility around those animals.
Most of the facilities, I don't know if I've ever been on a facility that's been truly all scrape of yours, but I mean, most of the facilities that I'm on that you've designed or I see, they're flush. Can you kind of expand on a little bit about just your experience with that, why you like that, what's special about that?
So throughout the southeastern U.S. and places in warm climates, the main manure management or manure application, nutrient management system is irrigation. And so, like a center pivot irrigation, for instance. And so, it's a fluid system. And so, keeping everything as a fluid is a good thing. And so, if you can start with a fluid, like in a flush system, take the big particles out of it through some kind of separation, and then end up with a dirty fluid, with dark fluid that you can put out into an irrigation system. Labor wise, is pretty efficient. So you can open up a flush valve, flush an entire barn of 300, 400 500 cows in just 2 or 3 minutes, and then the water goes away, and you're rocking and rolling. And then once you get to the manure system, then you go through there and to go through your separation system and go into a storage pond, and then from the storage pond you irrigate it. So it's a very efficient system, but it has its problems. And one of the problems is if you get 3 months of freezing weather, you got a challenge on your hands. And so that's, again, we go back to climate. So in the warm climates where we are, if you go into either into Australia, into Southeast Asia, you go into southern China, you go into anywhere that we're working in the warmer climates, it just seems to be a preference. The problem we run into is that some places, China was one of the places that was they didn't have any land, and therefore you had to haul manure. Vietnam was the same thing. It didn't have land that was associated that they could irrigate, and so you have to keep it into a solid form. So that's where the scrape systems come in. Yeah. So most of those were overseas. So whether it be in China, whether it be in Southeast Asia, whether it be someplace like that, they will scrape it. Most people, I guess the way we find it is that people scrape when they have to. They flush when they can.
They flush when they can, and then the as far as like flushing sand laid manure and just the whole alley design, what are there any obstacles you see with that, just getting those alleys completely clean with that sand that builds up behind the curb, just some of the things that you guys have done to help remedy that and keep those alleys clean?
Well, every day, um, every design that we do, every day that we go to these systems, we'll do a design. We think we've got it made, and then you go to a farm and you still got sand on the floor. So, so many dairy producers tell us the same thing, that I would get rid of sand tomorrow if there was a better way of doing this, and nobody's found it yet. So we call it the gold standard, but people call it a pain in the butt. So it's a matter of what else do you do. So with sand, we've tried different slopes on barns. We've tried higher volumes of valves, but in the long barns that we have, it becomes a problem because sand accumulates as it goes down the barn. So lately, especially in these bigger groups, the bigger parlors are having bigger groups. And so we went from 200 cow groups to 300 or 400 cow groups to five. We've got some newer farms that are 600 cow groups. So they're big groups and they're long barns. Even a 6-row barn is quite long. So what we've been doing is putting a secondary catch basin in the middle of the building. So an 800-foot long barn becomes a 400-foot long barn. So we flush the top into a trench. We flush the bottom into a trench. It seems to do a better job of flushing sand, and it doesn't accumulate because sand accumulates over time over distance. And so by the time you get to 800 or 900 foot barn, you get so much sand the flush can't carry it. Whereas if you cut the barn in half, it does a better job. So that's the latest designs that we've been doing, and they adds money to the facility. But it seems to help from a management standpoint. Jury's still out. I'm saying it's all wonderful right now, and someone's going to hit me in the head when I leave here to tell me it doesn't work. But that's what we're trying to do now.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that was kind of leading into that next question with these pen sizes. And I kind of like to talk about overcrowding a little bit right now, even with sand stalls and how we're managing those on facilities with the overcrowding and the bigger pens, and still maintaining good cow comfort. And what percentage losses are we really willing to accept as an industry for more cows in a pen, and all those things you have to assess and analyze. But I'm sure, like when you have these larger parlors, the parlors are obviously driving it, the pen size, and so we have more cows per pen. We have more sand usage probably if they're bedding how they should be bedding with more cows and more usage. So how just that whole challenge of that design. And you're right, the velocity of the water as you're flushing starts to really slow down, and so then that's when you start to see the sand accumulation as soon as you lose that, what is it, a foot per second or whatever you're designing for, then you start to lose that velocity and that power of that water to keep that sand moving and in suspension and out the barn to the next spot, to the next step in the system. So it is a challenge, but I mean, I hope that no one goes away from sand. Nobody finds another magic bullet to cow comfort, because I think sand obviously is the best. But
Yeah.
I'm a little biased. I think our whole
Well,
industry is a little
you never
biased. But yeah, but yeah.
you never know. It could change. It could change, Renee. I mean, when I first got started, it was everybody was using organic bedding. That was the key. And when we started using sand in the mid '90s. But when we started doing this, it was a challenge. But all of a sudden, people's mastitis problems seemed to go away, and the cows seemed to like it, especially in the warm climates. And so we started working around that, saying, okay, this is cool. But I wasn't driving this; the dairymen were. The dairy producers were trying to find a better way of doing this. And so maybe there's another thing that could come up down the road, and I don't know. I mean, the mattress manufacturers sure seem to think that, but we're not going to go there. But as far as from another betting possibility, I'm not going to. I'm not. I'm not. I'm not goofy enough to think that there's not going to be something later on. But as of right now, sand is king, and that's what we're designing around for the most part, except for in rare situations where an existing facility and things like that.
I agree. I mean, that's still the majority of what we work with today on the manure side, the manure system side of it, and separating or recycling sand. Yeah, I mean, there has been a lot of push with the digesters going in. I don't know how much you play into the digester side of it or get involved with that design. If that has come about, I'm sure quite a bit. So, is there any food for thought there on digestion and what you guys are doing and providing from a design standpoint?
So when we first got started with working with the digester groups, a lot of them were out of Europe and where they didn't have sand bedding, and so they were. I was the we had the tail wagging the cow, where the digester guys were starting to think that this was a digester that happened to have a farm attached to it. And so gradually over time, they started realizing that this is a farm that happens to have a digester. And so the farm has to operate and has to operate efficiently, and the digester is something on the side. It's not the reverse. So a lot of these guys, once they started realizing that, hey, we're going to use sand, you need to deal with it. So we're going to do our part to make sure that we can take out as much sand as we possibly can, but you guys have to figure this out. So we've gone through the whole thing of putting in the sand lane technology that we've normally been doing for 30 years. It's getting better and better, and we're not as high as pieces of your system, but they're pretty high. Once they start getting into the digester mode, we're trying to get as much sand as they possibly can, as you and I have talked about many times. Is that's where you go to the next step. You're saying we're going to take out the bulk of this sand with in basically a gravity type system, and then we're going to take that last little piece of it, whether we use an SMS system or we use a hydrocyclone or something like that, and try to get that little bits and pieces out. So there are things that you can do to get the sand out, but from I guess the big message that I would have is that if a dairy producer's out there and a digester guy comes in and says you have to get off of sand in order to use our digester technology, I would tell them to go find somebody else.
Go pound sand, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, go pound, go pound sand. That's right.
Go pound it. I think that yes, it no matter what I mean, we as a company and from the solution standpoint and working with systems that you've designed and then maybe bolt on to what you have, specifically like you said, to try to get this sand out. And sometimes the sand that we're trying to focus on that's ending up in a digester is might not even be the sand that is purchased and brought into the dairy for use of bedding. It could be sand that's coming in a lot of different other ways. And so just getting our arms around that and trying to figure that out, we're constantly trying to make improvements to do that. And so it's a challenge, and it's going to be something that we just continue to learn. Just like you had mentioned earlier, you learn as you go, and we're learning as we go. And I know it's the cost of sometimes cleaning out these digesters, but we have to cut our teeth on it, and we got to figure it out. The manure solid side of it, we've had a lot of dairies switch from sand and go to manure because it seemed like the path of least resistance. So these facilities that were built for sand and ultimate cow comfort with sand have now switched over. Some of not all of them, but there's a few that we've worked with, and but they don't want to compromise. They don't want to they don't want that bedding to compromise any of their results if they're going to switch to manure. So that's always a challenge to look at that and to say how good is the technology out there, how good can we make this product to go back into the cow. Is it going to be comparable to sand? It's not going to be exactly like, it's not going to be like sand. It's not going to be, but if we can get it dry enough and the cows can still remain comfortable and clean and their udders stay dry, they're not losing cows, then yes. But that goes hand in hand with a lot of extra work and a lot of management in the barns. And bedding with manure, it's such a light, fluffy material after we dry it. I mean, you're going to be in there every single day, bedding, grooming, fluffing, to try to keep these surfaces dry as possible for those cows to stay as clean as possible. I don't know how many facilities you've had a chance to work with that are, well, you said some of these models and some of these dairy businesses are going to just stick with the manure bedding model, or they're going to stick with the sand model. So every time they build a dairy, it's going to be sand. Every time the solids guys are going to build a dairy, it's going to be manure solids or composted manure solids or something like that. Do you have any food for thought on the composted facilities and kind of what goes into play there in those designs that you've done, or if you have done them?
So we go back to climate. And so we did several facilities in Australia that the last few years. They wanted to try something new. They wanted to go to manure solids. They were trying to get away from sand. I mean, people hate sand. They love it. They love what it does, but they hate dealing with it. But so they want to do something different. And so we toured with the guys from Australia, and we did some work. We went up into the Midwest. We went up into Canada, looked at some facilities that were working wonderfully with manure solids, and got a chance to see what they were doing. They had somatic cell counts that were in an acceptable range. Cows were happy. So we went back in and we designed facilities for them in Australia based on manure solids. But part of what I do is to help protect guys from themselves. So when we laid the system out, we tried to make sure that we had an alternate route for manure just in case that they could go into a sand lane. So, in our drawings, we said, here's where everything goes. And then had a little dotted line over here that says future sand lane goes here. And so they put a system in. They got their manure solids set up, and they started operating the system. And it worked well for a while. Cows seemed to be happy. And then they started having trouble with mastitis. And they had big trouble with mastitis. And then cows started dying. So, and that doesn't happen everywhere. But what it did happen to is that it was a different climate. And so you were trying to compare one climate to another climate, and they couldn't find anybody with their climate that was doing it successfully. And so, and it failed. But we had an out, and it didn't take very much to put a sand separation system in, and then it rocked and rolled. And you were actually on that farm not too long ago. So that was but it's okay. I mean, they took a chance, and he did his homework, and he tried to do the best. We, as a team, tried to do the best we could with it, but it makes a difference. We tried it in Florida, and the humidity and high rainfall in Florida and temperature. So it's humidity, high rainfall, and the temperature. It just kicked their butts, and they switched back over to sand. That does not mean that manure solids doesn't work. It means that you have to have the right climate. And so in a humid environment, this is a challenge. And we've tried many facilities in that southern and humid environments, and it fails. And so again, sand is plentiful. It's not very expensive. You can recycle the heck out of it, and you got a water system that you can put all the water you want to get rid of to clean up sand. And so that combination seems to work pretty well. So again, we're going back to Harner, and he's going to do his work with trying to make sure that we've got the right the right climate, the right system to meet the climate that we're designing around. And I can't. I mean, I keep saying the same thing over and over again. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. That's how we design.
I think that is. I think that's where you start. That and you said it. It's and we said it together. That's where you really start to have success because you got to know where you're building your dairy. You got to know how your cows are going to thrive in that environment. And you want to make it as easy as possible for the cows, but then you know you also want to make it easy as possible on the human factor too. I mean, uh, if you have a lot of issues and you might be putting more manpower or more expensive manpower towards stuff like that because you don't know how to troubleshoot it. And so it creates, there's going to be more people involved and, just a rat race of trying to figure it out. And then, at the same time, I love that you have to know your climate, but you got to know your climate for like basically what it averages out for the whole year. I mean, we talked a little bit about the challenges with the winter time and the 3 months out of the year you might be not be able to flush your barn, or every other year you have a really bad winter and you can't use your flush system, or your sand lane's not going to be as effective or whatever. That seasonality of your climate situation as well.
No, it's exactly right. And so, but of course, winter in Florida is 3 days, not 3 months. But yes,
3 days, maybe a week if you're lucky, Jake. We'll have to get you up to Pennsylvania or to Wisconsin or Michigan somewhere so that we can experience more snow.
I've been in cold weather
Just be
before.
like I know. I'm just jabbing you. Um, so this has been a really great discussion. I love talking about facilities. We could talk about it all day, all the little nitty gritties. But I think you hit the nail on the head. When we're designing these facilities, we really need to understand the climate. And I think just with all the research and all of the great people that you've brought to the table today and talked about, they all have so much wealth and depth of information and research behind that, and so you can't dismiss that. You got to know where you're going to build a dairy. The ventilation, the cow comfort, and all of that comes into play. I think sand is here to stay. I don't think it's leaving anytime soon. Might not be in my lifetime, maybe in somebody else's lifetime, but I don't see sand really going away. But I think there's lots of tools out there from the standpoint of sand and recycling this product. And like you said, it is a great product because not only is it from all the cow comfort standpoint and the gold standard standpoint from in the barn and all of the results, but it is a good recyclable product, and it does allow us to recycle it, whether it's really fine or if it's coarse. There's a percentage out there that dairymen can reclaim and put that and reuse that when they get it conditioned to the right point. They can be reusing that, just like manure solids as well. But nothing really can't replace the comfort and that you get from the sand part of it and the sand bedding, that what sand bedding offers. And so it is a great product, and I think we'll continue to see obviously your work as time marches on, and your team design these great facilities around cow comfort, around the climate. Is there anything else that you'd want to add? Just an overall general comment on dairy design as we close here. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I think the big issue that I guess that we look at things is that we're constantly trying to future-proof facilities, and so we're kind of looking into the future, trying to see what's going to happen, and trying to make sure that we don't design ourselves into a corner. So a lot of things that we try to do, whether it be different bedding systems or different manure systems, or trying to get into automation and things like that, we just try to see it, look into our crystal balls to go as far into the future as we possibly can within reason. So it's a challenge, but it's also part of the fun. But at the end of the day, you always try to learn something new every day. And the main thing, as I see it, is I'm constantly humbled by the people that we work with. Dairy producers that are in this day and age have to know so many things about so many subjects. And to be around these folks, these men and women who make their lives doing this, is just truly humbling and a lot of fun. And so it makes this job a whole lot of fun.
Well, great. Well, I really appreciate you joining us today. A lot of good conversation here, a lot of food for thought. You're a great team. You have a great, you impact the dairy industry in a great way. And like I said, I always am impressed wherever I go, I can always pick out a dairy that you more than likely your team designed or you had a part in. And so I think that says a lot across the globe, around the globe. With that, I just want to thank you again, and I wish you the best.
Okay, thank you, Renee. Good job. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Groundwork, a McClanahan podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite listening app for new episodes and follow McClanahan on social media for more content. Thank you.